turn out the way it has. But back to the questions, and Anna said, and there are a few, but I just wanted to reflect on two. One of them is this question about the network and its role, its play in how generally society is changing, but this question of democracy, our politics, how our politics shapes the way we live, current, trends in our societies and in our communities. And you asked, Anna, essentially you're asking, how can this network, how can we still stand up and be counted when it matters? And you cannot imagine how many times this has been like the conversation that Awel and I have had for years. And to step back, I think one of the things that got us really interested in this is that we got tested ourselves when we were the under 40s. In our 20s, early 20s, energy, enthusiastic, passionate. I worked for government. Awel was, very involved with big people. And we felt like we were really being tested. Our values, our belief systems were being tested by the environment we're working in. And this is not a criticism. It is just an appreciation of the reality. And I remember we had sessions there's the first one we had in Jinja many, many years ago. And I kept saying to people, and I would look at Canary and I would look at Raymond and say, and I've said this many times, you will be tested. Do not be deluded that the world out there is going to embrace your idealistic values, ideals, and think that you're going to change. You think you're going to change the world. Yes, you can change the world, but you will have to pay for it. When do you make those decisions when it matters? And to link it to the work of the network over the last 10 years, Anna, and I think this is where the strength of Leo Africa has been, and probably also one of the most challenging things, is this shift to, instead of looking at the big things, the project, come to you with a project, you give us a log frame, we fill it, we say we have actually done work. Our was stubborn, really dogged about individuals. How do we actually really build these individuals, their value system, their thinking, their belief systems, their belief in themselves? How do we shape that before they get into the collective, they get into the bigger environment where they're going to be tested? And I think it's not, what's the word? It's not a fancy thing. It's not one of those things that people would be interested to support. But I think it was the right thing to do. Now, how does the network continue cultivating those values amongst themselves and hold each other accountable, which is the other question you asked? Are you in some echo chamber where you reinforce your own, beliefs? In some ways, you become a bit entitled. You start earning some money. You believe that, you're the cream de la cream. And therefore, you're not challenging yourselves enough. I would say, though, having seen some of these guys closely, Awel and I don't know if I should tell this story. We were once in a group, WhatsApp group of these fellas. After we had done a session, trainings and everything, then something big political came up. The kinds of questions they asked us about what we think, what positions we're taking and everything, it was really, it was fire in there. And an administrator that was quite, did the good thing, the decent thing, and let us out of the group and let them deal with those issues themselves. So I will tell you that, and I think I have faith that the group itself is very, they challenge themselves, I would imagine, and I would like to think that they continue with that process. And lastly, you asked a question about this, changing, dynamic, complex world, and whether we are preparing ourselves and whether this generation is actually prepared for that. The linear thinking versus the very non-linear world out there. I think again, credit should be given to this generation that they're probably more creative, more innovative, more engaged than we give them credit for. And when things, if you're thinking about tools, digital tools and things like that, for example, that try and keep up with this changing world. I work in the, development finance and impact investing field. And the things that I see coming that we have to invest in, deals that we invest in, with founders of 23 years old, 25 years old, and raising a round of $20 million and everything, and changing sectors. They understand their society. They understand the problems their communities actually face. Angelo, myself, have had this conversation, and I will sometimes, and William, that I think our generation, when we are in this stage at the 20s or maybe early 30s, we're a bit insulated from we face these problems, but we still had somewhere to run to. We had government jobs we could still sneak into and probably find meaning. But, this generation is more like, this is the problem, no one is going to solve it. We won't sit here waiting for you to actually deal with it. We will confront it. So they find those solutions. They're a bit more agile, more adapt to these kinds of challenges. So I believe that that's something that we can credit them for. The question on whether they can survive the changes, especially in our politics, that's an open question. I honestly, you see it. We're all on social media. We already see a few falling off in some way or shape, taking very opportunistic, to be very honest, very blunt, very opportunistic sort of positions, and deciding to live another day, to survive. But there's still a critical mass that can push forward the ideals, the things that we strongly believe in as a group. So those are my above 40 thoughts.
Thank you, Hashim. A round of applause for Hashim.